Okay, is everybody ready to get started? I feel like that's awfully loud. Okay, welcome to the June Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Thanks for joining us. I'm clearly not John Milner, but I'm Sarah Jordan, and I'm going to chair today. We've got a pretty full agenda as usual, so it's our goal to get everybody out of here on time. So let's just stick to those 3-minute guidelines for limiting our public remarks. As a reminder, please limit individual conversations during the meeting. This ensures commission members and applicants can hear one another. Please remain quiet until you're called upon, and when you speak at the podium, please state your name and address for our records. Before the commission votes on each item, I'll ask if any members of the public wish to speak. Speakers are given 3 minutes to relay information to commission members. The agenda and documents for today's meeting are located on the PrimeGov website. If you're following along, select Agenda on the right side of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting to see the items being discussed. Written comments received more than 24 hours before today's meeting are posted online and were shared with commission members. At this point, new materials may not be shared with the commission. If you brought any materials with you, please keep them at your seat as we cannot accept or review these. Okay, roll call.
Jordan.
Present.
Gaines.
Present.
Ford.
Present.
Ramey.
Present.
Whitley.
Present.
Fifth quorum.
Okay, thank you. Procedures for today's meeting are noted in the agenda. For the sake of time, we ask anyone who is unfamiliar with the process to please refer to the procedures section. There are 2 items we would like to note specifically regarding the meeting process, and these involve certificates of appropriateness and appeals. Regarding certificates of appropriateness, after an application is approved and the 10-day protest period has expired, the Historic Preservation Officer will mail the certificate of appropriateness to the applicant. City construction permits cannot be issued until the certificate of appropriateness is issued. Please contact HP staff for final design review inspection or to withdraw items that will not be completed. Regarding an appeal to the Board of Adjustments, any person aggrieved by a decision granting or denying a certificate of appropriateness may appeal to the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustments. All appeals shall be made within 10 days of the commission decision by filing a written notice of appeal with the clerk of the Board of Adjustments. Katie, any news from the Office of the Historic Preservation Officer?
We had a request from a commission member to talk a little bit about the proposed ADU ordinance. So we're going to do that at the end of the meeting under items from Planning Commission. There will be no action taken on it. It's not a formal presentation. I just wanted to let people know in the audience, because I know folks have been following along, that we will have that discussion after the regular HP meeting at the end of the agenda. And other than that, nothing else to report.
Okay, have the commissioners had a chance to review the minutes from the May 1st meeting? Yeah. Anybody want a motion to move those forward or to modify them?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, would everybody please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, those minutes have been approved. Katie, anything from code enforcement?
As always, you all have the code enforcement report in your meeting packet. Nothing in particular to report on this month. If you ever have questions or concerns about items that you see there or that you don't see there that you think should be, please reach out to HP staff, or you can also contact the Action Center for more information.
Okay, any continuance announcements or requests?
We have no continuance requests on the agenda, and no new requests have come in since the meeting was published.
Okay, good deal. Dilapidated structures?
We have none to take any action on. I did want to report that the property at 2522 North Chartel, the church in Paseo, that the commission reviewed a dilapidated case on, went to council this week. It was continued to the next council meeting, so 2 weeks ahead. And they will hear it again at that council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any National Register nominations?
Nothing for this month.
Okay, so moving on to the consent docket. If the commissioners have had a chance to review these items, do we have a motion to approve perhaps, or any adjustments that need to be made? Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, would you guys please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, if you were on the consent docket, congratulations, your project has been approved. You are welcome to hang out with us for the duration, but you're also free to leave. Okay, moving on to cases for individual consideration.
So our first item is HPCA 23-00117 at 700 Northwest 40th Street, Crown Heights, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on application by Holly Hunt, HJH Design for Corinne Greenfield for certificate of appropriateness to 2 revised item 1 construct addition to relocate west window required. So this is kind of an unusual item. I'm going to give a little bit of background. This application to construct an addition was approved late last year. After that was approved, they came back for a revision to shift a window on the side of the previously approved addition down by 20 inches, based on some interior features that had been not accounted for in their initial proposal. There's a chimney that was larger than what they anticipated. So requested a revision to shift the window over about 20 inches. Staff approved that revision administratively. We can approve revisions that are less than a 5% change to the overall design and that are consistent with the purpose and intent of the original approval. When that administrative revision was approved, a neighboring property owner appealed the administrative revision. They received notice of it and submitted their appeal. That appeal went to Board of Adjustment in May, and there was quite a bit of discussion at Board of Adjustment. The link to that meeting was forwarded to the commission, so hopefully you all had a chance to familiarize yourself with the discussion. The Board of Adjustment was not comfortable with their own expertise to make a call on whether or not any suggested modifications to the design of the window were appropriate, so they remanded it back to the commission for further discussion. So today you can either deny the revision outright, you can approve the revision as was previously approved by staff, or you could, if agreed upon by the applicant, you could approve the revision with the condition that certain modifications be made to what was initially proposed.
Hello, everyone. Holly Hunt, 400 Northwest 23rd Street. This is very unusual. This is definitely a first for me, and I've done a lot of historic jobs. But that's exactly, Katie wrapped it up. It was short of getting onto the roof, I couldn't exact measure that chimney. It's a historic chimney. It was always in our plan to keep that chimney. So once we discovered its actual measurements, of course, after approval, this is what started all of this. But I did, the issue is privacy from the neighbor. And to me, that seems to be more of like their own issue. Like my client went through the proper channels. She hired an architect, she obtained a CA, she then contacted a contractor, and she's done everything right. We are still the addition is compatible. That's why it was approved at the first meeting. So this matter of shifting the window 20 inches to me doesn't change the application in any way. I hope you would agree with staff that this is a compatible and very appropriate project. Yes, sir.
From the Board of Adjustment meeting, was there not at the end of the meeting basically an agreement that the window was okay if they put a frosting on the inside of the window?
Well, here's the thing, that we talked about a lot of different things. And I think at that time, we just kind of were ready to button it up. So yeah, we were willing to make that compromise. At this point, we're willing to do blinds, shades. Frosting the glass is not historically appropriate. I feel like it's a slippery slope to make an exception here when the neighbor could easily just plant some evergreens to give more privacy. I don't feel like my client should bear the responsibility when she's done everything appropriate. And this is a common thing in these neighborhoods. Everyone's houses are like this and are close. We got maybe 10, 15 feet between these homes. But it's pretty standard for people to cover with window treatments on the interior side of their window. Any other option that we've heard is really not either fair to my client or it's not appropriate for the historic guidelines.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I feel pretty confident in our initial approval. Concerns with privacy in one's home need to be addressed in one's own home and property. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about the window. I don't love the idea of moving forward with any sort of frosted glass or altered glass that we would not ordinarily approve. Privacy doesn't really exist in these neighborhoods, so I think that that would be a ridiculous precedent to set for the next 32 applicants who come forward wanting.
Well, now we're talking about something like a applique on it, and inside which, of course, doesn't have to stay. So Katie, what was the end result on that as far as, did we decide, does it have to be now whatever decision is made here goes back to the Board of Adjustment again?
So if the appellant is not in support of the decision made today, they retain the right to go back to Board of Adjustment again.
Okay.
So I would say to that point, any decision made today, we want to make sure our findings provide clear direction to any and all parties as to why that decision was being made, so that if it does end up back at Board of Adjustment, they know what the commission was basing their decision on.
Yeah.
I know y'all are deep in discussion, I don't want to interrupt, but one other thing is, if privacy is that important to these neighbors, then they could take action to make changes to the guidelines in another way. Again, this homeowner, this project shouldn't bear that burden of that.
I mean, I certainly, am a fan of everybody being respectful of their neighbors, and I get that maybe a little bit more privacy is desired, but I'm just not, in reviewing this application, I'm just not seeing anything that is not approvable.
And privacy is not a guideline, so we're not beholden to that as a reason to deny, in other words.
Yeah, any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter?
I think you need to distribute those. We were told we could bring 15 pieces of information
That's
to the
fine.
meeting.
Yeah.
And I will direct you to the back because I don't expect you to read the narrative. My name is Benjamin Cowley. My wife and my 2 children reside at 704 Northwest 40th Street. We'd like to officially protest the administrative decision to approve the revision of the window facing west over our backyard. The original plan approved by HP in October, Exhibit 1 in the photos that I've provided. That window would have been mainly obscured by a chase on the house. The window has now been moved to the middle of the addition and directly overlooks our back patio and backyard. We think this window damages the historic nature of our back patio and our backyard. The historic nature of our backyard was the fact that we had privacy. As an example of how this will affect our privacy, my wife, Nicole Cozart, has a mutation in the BRCA1 gene, which increases her risk of breast cancer. Several of her family members have suffered from breast cancer, and some have died. In response to this, my wife underwent prophylactic bilateral mastectomies, followed by reconstructive surgery. Her reconstructed prosthetic breasts are uncomfortable, and manually repositioning them relieves the discomfort. In addition, her nipples have tenuous blood supply, and exposure to the sun increases their viability. The repositioned window at 700 Northwest 40th Street directly overlooks our backyard and the backyard where my wife would be sitting. Another example of how privacy would be affected, our 16-year-old daughter likes to sunbathe in the backyard. She sometimes undoes the strap on her back. When she repositions, she may expose her breasts. Once again, the window in question at 700 Northwest 40th Street directly overlooks the backyard where my daughter will be sunbathing. I would note that our neighbor who lives in the neighborhood since she was a child indicates that in the past, additions to posterior aspects of houses were limited to 1 story to avoid this type of privacy invasion. We've included examples from Crown Heights additions that include no lateral windows, Exhibit 3 on the back. Numerous other examples exist within our neighborhood. Thus, the proposed window at 700 Northwest 40th Street is not historic and damages the historic nature of our property at 704 Northwest 40th Street. Finally, the repositioned window at 700 Northwest 40th Street will adversely affect the resale value of our home due to the obvious privacy invasion. For all the reasons above, we object to the repositioned window and formally protest the revision, which was approved administratively. For all the reasons above, we hope that HP will agree that the repositioned window damages the historic nature of our property and reconsider the administrative approval of the repositioned window. I would finally like to note that we would like this protest to be made public knowledge. When we went to the Board of Adjustment and made our appeal, apparently they elected not to make this public. We don't feel like breast cancer is something that we should be ashamed of, and we don't feel like the fact that my wife has prosthetic breasts is something we should be ashamed of. Though they're uncomfortable, and unfortunately she can't remove her prosthesis the way an amputee can, she still has difficulty living with her prosthetic breasts. Once again, our contention is that the repositioning of this window damages the historic nature of our property, which we bought over 10 years ago, and when we bought it, we had privacy. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and we would be happy to discuss alternatives.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions? Any further adaptation of thoughts or concerns?
I'll say, this is clearly an emotional case for you all. I empathize with you. I understand the need and the desire for privacy. I understand what you're saying. All of that, although I empathize with it, isn't really within the purview of the historic preservation, privacy, permanency of specific neighboring properties is not a right. Things change all the time. It happens across the board. Sometimes it's a good change. Sometimes not everyone can agree to it. So I want you to know that you've been heard. I understand the concern. I just don't see that being something within the purview of what the guides do and what they support.
May I add one more comment? And I don't think this is HP's purview, but another reason why we're concerned about this is the occupant's ex-husband actually came to our property and assaulted us, about a month ago. Verbally assaulted my wife, verbally assaulted me, threatened me personally, professionally, and physically. He accused my wife of exposing herself to his children. We anticipate that this will simply increase the likelihood that there will be altercations of that nature. Once again, technically that's not within HP's purview. The final thing I would say is that this alters the historic nature of our house, and we kind of thought HP's purpose was to preserve the historic nature of the neighborhood. This alters the historic nature of our house.
Well, you're right that a lot of that was not in our purview. And certainly you're welcome to address those concerns, up the proper channels. But as far as, whether this does or does not impact the historic nature, I understand that that can be a little bit subjective, but we do have guidelines to help us, firm up these decisions and paths forward. And this does fall firmly within approvable guidelines. This is not something that we have not approved in many similar situations in this neighborhood and others. And while, to David's point, it does change surrounding areas, all changes do impact others, I'm just not seeing a reason to not approve this today.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
Okay, do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve HPCA 23-00117 with the specific findings noted in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
Do those findings provide kind of our, I don't have them pulled up right now.
They are the original findings from when it was approved the first time as well, I believe.
We need to add any strength to
So
that.
the findings in the staff report say that alternative glass is generally not supported by the guidelines, that the proposed window is not visible from the public rights-of-way, that the proposed fenestration is compatible and contributes to the compatibility of the addition to the historic character. So
Do we need to say anything specific to the Board of Adjustment additionally that we didn't already say, considering that's come back?
I mean, I would personally probably add that HP wants no part of regulating privacy
That's what
amongst
I was
neighbors.
thinking. That's what I was thinking, that there's not a guarantee from property to property next, that there's a guarantee of privacy or something.
Okay, we've got another
I don't
member
know.
of the public up here. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Miles Mixon, 515 Northwest 42nd. I'm with Revive Design Build. We're doing that project. Only thing I was trying to get some clarity on, because I've been asked by the homeowner and other people, is there any scenario where we do this and somehow through another channel, Board of Adjustments, whatever, that they're like, oh no, you need to pull the window after we've already done all, I mean, the window's in, we've already tiled the bathroom, we've set plumbing fixtures, I mean, like,
You're asking
we've
if you
been
need to
delaying
stop.
doing the siding on the exterior because we were like, what if something were to happen and we have to go yank siding off?
I would make a suggestion that your recommendation to the Board of Adjustment is that not only is it compatible, but that privacy is not in your purview, perhaps. That
You'll have to,
privacy-
I think, reintroduce, does she have to?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, she's already
Um,
introduced herself.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm happy to add a specific finding that neighboring privacy is not within the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission.
do we need to address this question before we complete that motion?
Yes.
I don't know the answer, so I'm going to
That's
defer
what I
to
was
staff.
kind of worried about, but
Sorry.
I understand.
Would you
Thank
say
you all.
again- Would you say again what you just asked
I
about?
believe they're asking is if there is a possibility that Board of Adjustment would require, or some other entity would require them to make a more substantial change to the window, and if they should stop construction.
That's something that you would have to decide, the Board of Adjustment, if this matter is appealed, if this motion is approved, they would decide at that hearing
Okay.
what action would happen next. So we really couldn't predict that today, but you're certainly welcome to attend the meeting in
Yes.
the event.
And we're all
This
just
matter is
assuming it goes
approved.
to the next Board of Adjustments.
Well,
Meet-
in the
hearing.
event it is appealed,
Yes,
so we would have to wait to see if that
Okay.
is the case.
thank you all.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't know that this needs to make its way into the motion, but to my knowledge,
In the purview of anybody. Go on.
well, I was gonna say, it's not a property right to have privacy in the backyard, so it's not really,
Well, it also doesn't
Really another
change the
challenge.
historic structure of his home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to clarify that, to Board of Adjustment, that this board isn't going to get into a situation in which we are reviewing privacy for applicants. It's not realistic. The guidelines already address very reasonable standards that effectively do address what's a reasonable expectation of privacy and build level on a lot. So I
think
just.
those comments are sufficient. The Board of Adjustments can watch this if they want to.
Okay,
You
so-
all may, so the first finding is that alternative glass is generally not supported. You all may want to strengthen that, since that was kind of the one thing that was discussed, to specifically state that in this instance, alternative glass would not be appropriate,
Okay,
as we all keep piling on to
Yes.
Caitlin's motion.
okay, I will make a motion to approve HPCA 23-00117 with the specific findings that's noted in the staff report. And I would like to add to the first finding that any alternative glass would not be appropriate in this instance, would not be approvable, and add another specific finding that neighboring privacy is not within our purview and not something that we can speak on or rule on.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gaines. Would you all please vote in prime gov? Okay, the motion has passed. Thank you all. Okay, moving on to HPCA 24-0007.
This is at 3233 North Harvey Parkway, Edgemere Park, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on application by Brandon Westbury for certificate of appropriateness to 3 construct attached pergola with cover, fans, and light fixtures, elective. A portion of this application for the patio in the rear yard was approved at the previous meeting. This item was continued due to concerns that the pergola is illustrated to be attached to the house. We wanted to see it reconfigured so that it was freestanding and not tying into the rear wall of the historic structure. We have not received any new information from the applicant at this time, so staff has recommended another continuance. They do have one continuance remaining, and staff would recommend continuing to the August meeting, just in the interest of giving them as much time as possible, and particularly since our July meeting is a holiday week. So that would be August 7th.
Okay, is the applicant present? Okay, it appears the applicant is not present. Without any new information or commentary from the applicant, I would be inclined to continue it and hope that requested changes are made by August 6th. Yeah. Anyone from the public who'd like to speak?
I'll move to continue HPCA 24-0007 to the August 7th meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Commissioner Poore. Would you all please vote? Okay, that motion has passed, and we will hopefully see that one again in August. Okay. Moving on to HPCA 24-00023.
This is located at 424 Northwest 27th Street, Jefferson Park, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on application by Caitlin Turner, Williams Box, Forshee and Bullard for Ryan Watts, RGW Real Estate Holdings, LLC, for certificate of appropriateness to 1 demolish all structures elective. So there was a previous application for the same thing within the last year that was withdrawn. They have since resubmitted with additional documentation on the condition of the structures that was recommended for a continuance in April. The applicant asked to be continued to the June meeting. They have since submitted an updated structural engineer's report that provides a little more information on the feasibility or infeasibility of making repairs to the historic structures. And I'll let you walk them through all of that. Staff gave you kind of a 3 options staff recommendation. If you feel convinced by what has been submitted that the structure is infeasible to repair, that it is an imminent threat that cannot be alleviated through any means other than demolition, there is a recommendation in there for an approval. If you remain unconvinced of that, then you could either continue it or deny the application.
Okay. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Caitlin Turner, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you.
So yes, since we withdrew the application, we did have a professional engineer and registered construction inspector go out and do a report. Tim Johnson's here with me to address some of those findings. The ordinance lays out justification and reasonings for when a demolition is appropriate, and I would like to just highlight the ones applicable to this property. There is the main structure, and there's also the garage apartment in the back. So the first one is that the structure is in a state of decay or ruin and poses an imminent threat to public health or safety, and the demolition of said structure is required to alleviate said threat. The second one, since there is a garage or other accessory building, if the structure is not original to the property, and if the structure, one of the factors has minimal visibility from the public right-of-way. So Tim Johnson will get up here to discuss regarding the imminent threat. And then the detached garage was actually constructed between, I think, 1930 to 1944. It's not original to the property, which satisfies one of the criteria for the accessory structure. And it also has minimal visibility from 27th. If you're actually in front of the lot head on, you'll see that it lacks visibility from the public right-of-way. So with that being said, Tim, would you like to join me up here? Unless you all have any questions for me now.
Commissioners, any questions for the time being?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue, Oklahoma City. As Caitlin mentioned, our firm was contacted, and we frequently do home inspections for both situations like this where it's being asked about its condition prior to a demolition application. But we also do these for private residences that need repair done for their houses, and we then recommend a solution to allow for a contractor to come in and make a repair that would stop a damage from continuing to occur. That said, we made a very thorough inspection of all the units. There's the one single-story unit in the front, the main original house, and the two-story garage in the back. We looked at it thoroughly, took a lot of pictures, as you can see if you review the report. The main house suffers from lack of maintenance on the foundation, and the floor supports were inadequately sized originally. So they have begun to deflect and crack. There's termite damage and a lot of water damage on both structures. The foundation on the main structure is literally stacked CMU block. It was mortared at one time, but as you can see in the photographs, the mortar's pretty much gone. And so you're looking at a unit that's stacked on block. The back garage foundation appears to be made up of just a simple 4-inch slab, which has suffered a lot of damage and cracking. You've got a 2-story load on the outside perimeter with no foundation under it. So the 2-story structure has sagging in both the roof, ceiling, and flooring of the second floor, all of which cannot be repaired without fully removal of the structure. The warpage has been there so long, the wood has taken that configuration and can't be bent back into any kind of a normal standard straight piece of board. So to get, for example, to get the waves and sloping out of the gabled roofs, the whole roof structure would have to be taken down and replaced and redecked and rebuilt. Can that be done? Yes. However, if you're going to take it down to that level, then you need to fix the foundation and the walls, which means you take the walls down to the foundation, repair the foundation, and build them back up. And so because of, and that's just the structure. If you read the report and look at the photographs, there are a tremendous amount of code violations, plumbing, air conditioning, and sewer that serve rooms that have been added on, not properly vented over time. And so you have, if you're going to take this under as a project to repair, you'd have to bring it up to code. And for example, the laundry room on the back side of the main structure does not meet code and would have to be removed and completely rebuilt. So we did make a second inspection. There were some questions that I had after we drafted our first report that we went back and re-reviewed, and on the second page of our, on the third page of our cover letter, we added some additional information about the disrepair in some of the foundation stuff that I wasn't clear on. The day I think we went out the first time, it might have been raining. But anyway, that said, it's our opinion, my opinion, as the undersigned of the letter, that the structures need to be removed and that they are at risk of public safety in the condition they're in. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for all of the information. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the engineer?
I think this is one of those hard ones that I always struggle with because you can, Tim, nothing against you, but you can always find an engineer to say that it needs to be demolished. You can also find somebody that says that they can make repairs to it, although it will be costly and expensive. I mean, it can be done. So I feel like we like are constantly in this battle of demolition, of how to know what the right action is. Is it, is it really damaged beyond repair, or is it just such a costly endeavor that it's not financially feasible? I don't know. Like, that's where I struggle with how to make these determinations.
I do have a couple of questions. How long has your client owned the home?
Since 2007?
Okay. Have they ever lived in the home?
No.
Was it just a rental, or it's been vacant?
Correct. It looks like 2005. I misspoke. 2005. There was a permit that was pulled in 2005 to remodel the structure, and then a water heater installed in 2007. But since then,
So has it been vacant since
uninhabitable.
2007?
I would have to confirm.
Okay. I would just be really curious to know, I mean, if it's been vacant for, 20 years, kind of what was the original intent upon purchasing, and what was the condition upon purchasing? I know this commission has heard the phrase demolition by neglect thrown around a lot, and I certainly don't throw that out cavalierly, but, this does, from just a street view, look like it's largely historically intact, certainly not without flaws, but to just think about it sitting empty for 20 years, which is anybody's right, of course, they can do that. They can have an empty house if they would like one. But I just would be really curious to understand the condition upon purchasing, and kind of what the intent was then, and, if it was restorable then, why was it allowed to sit vacant and now come down to this moment of demolition? And I'd also like to know, thoughts on future plans for the space, if there are any preliminary discussions there.
This is the first step. Anything that we ultimately end up doing, or the property owner, we would of course have to come back before this body for you all to hear and decide if it was appropriate. Regarding the foundation by neglect, I understand your comment. However, whenever it comes to the significant foundation issues for the primary structure and the just sheer lack of foundation on the back structure, these are issues that were ultimately inevitable. As Tim had said, it wasn't done correctly to begin with. So it was a matter of time before the foundation started failing, the stem walls start failing. To correct the foundation, each wall would ultimately have to be replaced so that they could actually get to the foundation. At that point in time, if the whole thing is slowly replaced, I mean, I guess it's, it's what's needed to make it a habitable structure. And at that point in time, there are going to be new walls. So this is just a more efficient way to achieving what will ultimately have to be done regardless.
I don't think historic preservation is inherently efficient, so I hear your argument, and certainly if we were somewhere else, I'd be more inclined to agree with you, but I don't think I could get there on this one. And it's, even just within our inboxes, this one has been batted around for a year or so, and just kind of knowing the backstory that it has been sitting empty for 20 years, I just am not seeing something that's worthy of being torn down, especially without any. I do understand that we certainly could not approve something for this space right now. You don't have anything in front of us, but I just don't want to set a precedent of, let's buy cheap empty houses, let's leave them vacant for a decade or two, and let's tear them down, and let's build exactly what we want in this space. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it's the purpose of this commission or that district.
I don't think that was necessarily the idea, and especially when you look at these applications on a case-by-case basis. Again, this ultimately is a foundation issue, so that's what sets this apart from maybe other applications. But then, I mean, is there something, since we have this ordinance that outlines justifications for when a demolition is appropriate, and since we have a professional engineer's report that comes to that conclusion, is there something in the report that you do not agree meets the provisions in the code? It's questions or issues that you have with it that we could potentially address, since we do have that ordinance in place.
Well, I do know, speaking to the garage apartment, the accessory structure, I mean, there's been a lot of talk on, this horseshoe, and I'm sure elsewhere, about, you know, what constitutes historic. Just because it's not original does not mean it's historic. A lot of things built in this neighborhood were built within the range that you said that this accessory structure was built. So to me, that point is kind of moot. It's, you know, approaching 100 years old, so that's definitely, to me, meeting the definition of historic.
What about for the primary structure?
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, yeah, we've set up, especially in Jefferson and Paseo specifically, they're kind of positioned for this occurrence or this issue because the houses are small. The smaller the houses get, the less efficient or economically viable they are to renovate. This is not. It's dangerous. I get it. It's not uncommon over there. I mean, I can think of 3 houses on my block that have CME block foundations that are a little scary. So it just, we've turned down other houses. I don't know what that path is to clear those. You know, it's just a tough one because it isn't uncommon. It isn't an immediate, well, I don't want to challenge that, but
Well, it certainly
does it
something
meet
that
the
existed in
threshold,
2007.
like using other cases, and I don't want to talk active cases, but crossing the threshold for can it be remediated by any other means besides demolition? Can you shore that foundation up? Can you? Probably. I don't know. I mean, that Tim's suggestion, I agree with everything he's saying, is the most rational way to do it. So I don't know. It just, I feel like that, and there isn't a line to to read, but it's like it's got to be really bad. I mean, the house, I think that case is over in Mesta Park, was in just as bad shape.
I think the difference
that.
to me regarding these two is, I mean, for one thing, this is still, that one was not really recognizable as any original historic form. Like, that was kind of the case in point to me. This one, I struggle to understand. Like, it is contributing, in my opinion. You know, that block foundation was there upon purchase in 2007. So I think that's what I'm struggling with. It just feels like we're setting the stage for somebody to come in and just say, you know, I'll scoop up something cheap and I'll wait a while and then I'll go show them how bad it is. And I just think that this commission has to be extremely careful about what we're allowing in terms of demo. And I'm not seeing it here, but hear the foundation concerns. Certainly interact with a lot of old houses in my everyday as well and see a lot of things that should have been done differently, but I don't think I'm there.
Yeah, and I think just being candid, like I don't know what that threshold is. Like, I think you've made the case that meets the ordinance. I don't know that it's super clear. Like, I think that's why it's tough, because it's sort of gray.
Understood. I guess a couple more questions for you all. The first, in the event that we are going to adequately try to bring this thing up to code without a demolition, and it would ultimately require the sides, all 4, to be removed, where's the justification in allowing for each side to be removed and redone than this application before you? Like, what's the difference there, I guess, is my main question.
Where do you cross that threshold where it's no longer historic?
Exactly, yeah. Because if it's adequately going to be repaired, it ultimately is going to come down. It's just going to come down in phases.
Well, but we do see people, I mean, re-side an entire house, for instance, but it's being put back in the manner in which it existed. So I think that's the difference, right? I mean, this is a structure that for most people just retains its historic integrity and looks the way it has always looked. And so I think that's the difference, is that we see people renovate the entirety of structures all the time. And to me, it would come down to, like, if you were re-siding a home and redoing every bit of siding on the whole home, I mean, yeah, you took off all of the old siding, but you're putting back what was there. It's a restoration versus a demo. I mean, we have no idea what would go back in this space. I mean, this is somebody who's lives in another state, never occupied the home, has owned it for 20 years.
I have a little bit of a concern on your pictures. You included a lot of pictures and reasoning for the house structurally not being there, but a lot of them are things that are just neglect. You included a lot of pictures of trees on the roof that have caused the roof to fall in, but there were trees that fell on the roof. You have parts where in the back or there's rotting wood. That's where I have a problem. If things have been done over time to try to secure that, it would show that this just isn't neglect. I mean, we see lots of times somebody buys a house and then immediately needs, oh, it's a danger, we want to tear it down. I have a bigger concern with that than somebody that's had a property for a long time. But a lot of the things on this property are obvious neglect, and then it was included in our packet to show us that it was neglect. That's where I'm having a concern. If it was just the foundation and just the safety on that, personally, I would have left it at that and not shown the other things that show, obviously, there was a lot of time and neglect to the property. So that's a concern I have that doesn't help it.
Understood. My last question to y'all would be, if someone were to go seek a permit, there are issues with both of these structures not being up to code. And to bring them up to code, I think this says that to bring up to current code, the building cannot be saved. That's referring to the detached garage and then the pieces of the structure that cannot be brought up to code without completely being replaced. So I guess that just, again, question
That's
to you
half
all
of
when
everything
there's,
south of 63rd Street. I mean, it just, like, that's an argument that could be made for every single case. We see it's my house, I mean, it's everything that's over a certain age. I mean, we can bring certain things up to code, but yeah, to your point, to bring everything in a home up to code, most of the house would have to go in a lot of these instances. So I just,
Well, and I
or
think
it
one
just
of it
gets
is,
circular.
I think one of it is, in our charge, does this house retain historic fabric? Is the majority of it. And I think if you're looking at the property, it still retains a lot of that. The code issues, those are issues for, your appeal to the Board of Adjustment to the city for their code violations. Those are some other issues. As Board of Adjustment said last month, we don't know enough about historic preservation to send it back to us. I think some of those code issues, you have a valid point, but that may be a little out of our purview.
I would be curious to hear from any public member.
yep, if we are ready for that, questions for the applicant, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak? I know we had several letters come in, largely in opposition to the demolition. Looks
Yep,
like we've got at least 7 or 8.
I was just going to note that as folks walk up to speak, that you all have letters that were uploaded into PrimeGov as attachments, and one that came in today that is not in PrimeGov, but that is at your seat.
Okay, thank you. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name's Tammy Donnell, 601 Northwest 27th Street.
Thank you.
This is kind of personal for me. This was my grandparents' home, and my dad, uncle, and granddad built the back structure right after they came back from WW2. I grew up in this house. My brother lived upstairs. There comes a time when we all have to sell our properties, and it's unfortunate when it's sold to people that do not take care of it. Thank you for mentioning about neglect, because this is what I see all through. I don't go down that way very often because it is so hurtful to see what has taken place. But anyway, I'd like to read a statement, please. And it was occupied last year, early part of the year. It has not sat vacant for 20 years. I live a block and a half away. I read a quote the other day that no one's interested in your hard work, only the results. This is my family's results of their hard work. I'm here to speak out against the demolition of the 2 historic structures at 424 Northwest 27th. The front house was my grandparents' house, and the 2-story garage apartment was built by my granddad, dad, and uncle. The front house has a unique hip roof or a pyramid roof, and the only one like this in the area. The back garage apartment is over 50 years old. I happen to know how it was built. It was not poorly built because my granddad was the rough-end carpenter for the home that I currently live in on 27th Street. To tear down either structures would leave a hole in a historic neighborhood. Since my family has sold the property, it has fallen into great disrepair, and unfortunately, it's just been kind of a rental. Well, again, too many renters in it and lack of maintenance. The owner is apparently trying to achieve demolition by neglect, and this is, again, there's just neglect all over the place. Nothing that has been mentioned it can all be repaired. I work on houses all the time, and in other words, we have to bring in folks to help us do the work, but it can be done. So I ask that you not allow demolition of this historic piece of property. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to speak on this? Commissioners, any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, come on up. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Zella Gibson, 920 Northwest 25th.
Thank you.
And I am just here to support all this of homes, of people coming in and just trying to demolish by neglect. And from what the city is wanting, this is one of the things they are asking for is garage apartments in the back. So, and then of course, since it is historical, I think we should save it. Thank you for your time.
You're back.
Yeah, just a quick response. Regarding the comment about showing things that have caused the deterioration. And when we look at these, the deterioration or the condition oftentimes is derived from cause and effect. We showed you a picture of the fact that the attic had been there had been a fire in the attic. And it was evidenced by the wood being burnt and being scabbed onto with new wood. That's a cause and effect that affects our analysis. So to not show those, I think, would be a disservice to the inspection. But I just wanted to address that. I mean, it can't, yeah, the limbs on the roof, that's obviously neglect and, you know, a bad windstorm or an ice storm or whatever.
Yeah.
But the fire in the attic was not purposely done, but and they came back and repaired. It was just the way it was repaired is an effect.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Other questions? I guess my last comment would just be that we have the ordinance that outlines when it is appropriate for demolition. We have a professional engineer's report that comes to that same conclusion. Just because other houses have had the ability to be renovated doesn't mean that every house can adequately be repaired to make it habitable. So we would just ask you to look at this individually, and I'd be happy to answer any last questions that you all have.
Thank you. Well, I don't know. Oh, we got some more public commentary.
I have a handbook here. Tammy Donnell, 601 Northwest 27th. I wanted to read this off of page 13. It said, demolition of a historic structure is always discouraged, and these design guidelines require review and proposed demolition of the historic preservation, or by the Historic Preservation Commission. In the past, preservation guidelines were mainly attuned to the collective historic integrity of a district, citing a demolition as detrimental to the overall character of the neighborhood. And it says reusing older buildings not only sustains their embodied energy, but it reduces waste and sprawl. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. I mean, for me, I think it is contributing to the historic nature of the neighborhood. For me, that's enough to not move forward with the demolition today. If anybody has further thoughts, happy to continue discussing, but for me, I think right now what I see, I would not feel comfortable moving forward today with the demolition. Anybody agree or disagree or want to make a motion?
Are you thinking,
I mean, I would continue it. I
Continue
think
it?
it's absolutely reasonable to continue it. I don't think we necessarily have to deny it today or anything, but
I have a question about the continuance, on like what is our purpose for, I mean, because if this body wants, if the body feels that we shouldn't allow for demolition, we should at least give the applicant the chance to move to a different avenue.
yeah,
Yeah.
my question is like, what are we
Yeah, that's a fair
expecting?
question.
What
Sometimes we just
information are we
deny, I mean-
expecting for continuance? Like, what are we lacking?
Well, we do only have a very small group here today, is one thought. I don't know that my mind would necessarily be changed, it always could be changed, but I mean, from what I see right now, I think that it contributes historically, and that's kind of where I will be in the next few meetings. So I think that that's a fair question. Should we just deny it and allow the applicant to move on to a different body? I don't know that I know the answer to that. Happy to defer to staff.
Is it reasonable to ask the applicant
don't
if
know.
they have a preference?
I don't know if it is or not.
If I
Okay.
could, regardless of the motion, if I could at least get something that points to why the engineer's report is not meeting the ordinance that's in place, that would be extremely helpful.
And yes, the applicant would need to agree to a continuance.
If there are things that we can address, if there are things that don't satisfy the ordinance to you all, then we would be happy to, get that continuance and provide that information or provide those answers, but that's kind of where I'm at. If there's nothing that we ultimately could supplement, then
Yeah, I think the only reason is to get a different lineup.
as to what?
Get a different lineup up here. If you wanted to test it on a different crowd or a more, with the missing people, but.
I mean, I'll go back to, it does seem like a lot of neglect has happened, and I do think everything is repairable. Is it cost effective? Maybe not, but that's a risk somebody took 20 years ago, and then sat there and didn't seemingly make improvements to eliminate deterioration. So again, you can probably go out and find an engineer that would say, yeah, this could be repaired. I mean, it's going to be costly and expensive. So that's where I struggle. And I do think it's contributing historically. It's been there long enough that it's, like she said, almost 100 years old for the house. I just struggle with having it demolished.
I think we've also denied other applications who have tried harder and quicker to save structures that have been in the same, if not worse, amount of disrepair. And so that's, I think the biggest thing for me is just that it's almost 2 decades of an owner not addressing issues that needed to be addressed sooner rather than later. So I
Of known
struggle.
issues, so I agree. Now, as to whether we deny it or continue it, I don't know the answer to that, and so I think that comes to you. Are you open to us continuing it?
Due to the fact that the report, it sounds like, isn't necessarily lacking any substantive information, then I don't think that a continuance would really change anything or bring us to a different conclusion. I, again, just want to leave you all with, if each wall is ultimately going to have to get removed to bring it up to, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but to bring it up into a safe, up-to-code structure, at what point does that historical aspect kind of transition off? And then 2, you will ultimately know what goes here again, because it will have to come back for a CA. So if, to the point that if it's removed wall by wall by wall versus all at one time, but you would know what is rebuilt if it's removed wall by wall by wall. I mean, would you not still know that what is ultimately going to be rebuilt due to the requirement for a CA?
I would just kind of rebut that there are plenty of historic structures that are literally taken down brick by brick and rebuilt, replaced, and put back to preserve them. So, I think it does happen. So, the argument of wall by wall by wall I mean, so many structures have been preserved all over by that exact method.
I'll note that the Secretary of the Interior has standards for reconstruction of historic buildings that have been totally lost to a fire, an earthquake, et cetera. So reconstruction is not, a preferred method of preservation, but it is a recognized method. There are standards and criteria by which people can do that. Our guidelines identify conditions under which someone can reconstruct a building that has been accurately documented. So obviously that's not anyone's preference, including a property owner, but it is a recognized method of preserving a historic structure.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, commissioners, perhaps a motion. I can't make one. One of you will have to.
So I'm just asking the with prejudice or without prejudice question.
I mean,
Denial.
I prefer with prejudice, but that said, I do think that quorum is an issue here and attendance is an issue here, and I think that it is a path where that they can bring this forward, with a full commission body here. I think it's a little bit of a disservice to not have full attendance all of the time, so I would probably say without prejudice, as much as, it's not my personal opinion, but I think it probably is appropriate to say without prejudice.
I'll move to deny HPCA 24-00023 without prejudice, based on the findings in the staff report 1 through 7.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gaines. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Poore. Would you all please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay. There we go. So next up we have HPCA 24-00032 at 704 Northwest 28th Street.
This is located in Paseo, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on application by Tuan Tran for certificate of appropriateness to 1, replace all windows required, 4, paint brick at front of dwelling elective, 5, paint brick porch components elective, and 6, replace siding at rear addition required. This item was heard before the commission once previously and continued. I think they have made some changes over the course of their back and forth with staff on what they're proposing. We are still not in support of painting the brick. The guidelines clearly prohibit that and discourage it as being detrimental to the condition of the brick. I believe we do not have adequate information on the windows to recommend approval of the replacement of the window. Similarly, we are lacking information on an appropriate siding material and have just overall recommended another continuance of this application.
Okay, is the applicant present? Hello.
Hi.
Would you please go ahead.
Tuan Tran, address 704 Northwest 28th.
Thank you.
Yes, I've been working back and forth trying to figure out how I should approach and what information to send in. And so the windows that I'm proposing to replace, I sent in all the specs. What do I need to do to kind of figure out what is needed and what is not matching what the board is wanting?
Okay, yes, very reasonable question. We understand it can be a little confusing sometimes, so staff is probably the best place to start. Do we have specifics on exactly what we are missing with regard to the windows?
So I believe we are missing complete documentation of existing windows. We are needing some information on the transparency and glass in the proposed windows, and that we do have some changes to window openings, although those appear to be on the rear of the structure and not visible from the public right-of-way. We generally don't support changing the size of window openings. The guidelines don't support that, but at the rear of the property, changes to windows can be accommodated when it's not visible from the public right-of-way.
Okay, so we need information on the type of glass.
Okay.
And when you say we're lacking information on the status of the current windows, could we be more specific for him about exactly what it is we need him to show us?
So I think it's, each window kind of opening dimensions. It's things like the muntins and mullions between the window that are being replicated, all those types of details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question about what we're needing with regard to the windows for the next
Yes.
meeting? Okay.
Yes.
So would you all like to move on to the other items, since we seem to have I think we're going to hear the windows again no matter what. So if we want to discuss the other items, I think we could probably safely start there.
And I should say I misspoke on the recommendation. We did recommend approval of the replacement of the siding at the rear addition with the condition that the specifications of that siding be provided to staff.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant on the other items?
So on the paint brick up front, it looks like it's already existing
Yeah,
with paint.
I had a contractor come out, try to remove it since the last meeting, just to try to see what I could do with it, and he removed a piece of it, and the brick was so porous that the paint actually was seeped deep into the brick, so there's no way for us to remove it without destroying the brick. So I understand that the commission wants to keep the original look. What are my options as far as preserving this, or could I at least paint the areas that's already painted to kind of match it up, or what is the commission proposing I do here?
Did you acquire the property like this with it already painted? That's what it looked like. Yeah.
Oh, the property was painted upon acquiring it. Okay.
You see all the white
Yeah.
between the windows and the white in front of the entry door, that is painted when we got the property. so-
Okay, so that's a great question.
I mean, it seems like it would be really hard to get that off.
Yeah, I
mean,
think,
we've gone back and
what
forth
we
with this.
have, and I don't know if you've provided any of that back and forth to Angela, what we have done in the past when we've got a property that's already been painted, we have asked people to attempt to remove the paint and to provide documentation of that attempt so
Okay.
that we can kind of show the commission, this is what we tried, this is what the result was. Is it feasible or not to proceed with, continuing to try to remove it, or do we, kind of do no further harm and leave it as is?
Can you like at least get a statement from the contractor that did that,
Yeah,
showing what they did?
we can get additional pictures from the areas that we removed, and then I'll get a statement from our contractor
Okay.
stating that.
Be great.
Okay.
So,
So we
since he asked the question, sorry, is he, like, if you're satisfied with the documentation from the contractor, is he allowed to now repaint over the white to either try to make it match? Does he paint the rest of the house to match the white? And
Thank
just
you.
for his own clarification.
That was my question, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So staff would not recommend what has been painted, it wouldn't have been my suggestion from the get-go in the absence of any paint, but what has been painted are kind of defined architectural features of the home. It's the gable at the front porch, it's the architectural, the arches over the windows. I would say if that paint can't be removed, then that's fine to leave it. It's fine to continue to paint it and keep it in a good condition, but not to extend the paint to brick that is not already painted.
So we would prefer, if he cannot remediate this paint, we would prefer for only this defining feature to stay painted. Oh, boy.
Yeah, so you're saying just to paint the
Oh.
white a different color? Is that what you're recommending?
Well, once masonry is painted, we don't review the paint color. So you could go with something more similar to the brick. You could go with something that's a darker tone that doesn't.
So he could literally paint that purple.
No?
Let's work on this. Do we know of any does this body know of any remediation strategies beyond what I know we've been down this path before with the property in Heritage Hills. Anybody here have a new suggestion for him as to how to remove the paint from this brick? Have we ever explored the idea? Now, nobody panic, I'm not trying to put a financial burden on anybody here, but have we ever explored the idea, say he had done this himself, he'd painted this, would we ever say, no, you need to re-brick it, you need to go find an appropriate match and you need to re-brick it?
We have had people attempt to, especially with something like a porch column, take it down, turn the brick around, and put it back with the unpainted side of the brick exposed. Depending on the type of brick, one side doesn't necessarily match the other. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. I think an applicant came up with that on their own and said, let me give this a try. I don't know what methods you've tried at this point, what products you've tried. We do know that there are certain products out there that are very successful, but that again is dependent upon the brick, the condition of the brick, the texture on the surface of the brick as far as how well that
And are they
works.
all chemical solutions? I mean, there's not a sandblasting or ice, like we tried to actually ice blast my fireplace. We just discovered that the brick underneath it was not the type of brick we thought it was. so
Yeah,
we
what,
decided to
what my contractor told me, if it was a smoother brick, then he
that you could
could
do that.
sandblast
Okay.
it, but because how porous this brick is, it would cause too much damage to the brick by sandblasting it. And I did talk to him about flipping the brick because that was an idea that came up. And the problem with that is we can't find a contractor that's willing to work on a house like this to restore it to how it was. And this brick is nowhere to be found to even try to replace it. So we had that discussion, and that, I'm not gonna say impossible, but that is a very difficult task to try to restore it, so.
Would we ever recommend a solution that is, like if he, if we were to move forward saying, well, okay, this is all that's been painted, so we're not going to allow you to paint the rest of the home. Would we ever move forward with a suggestion of something more architecturally pleasing than the painted brick in the one location?
Like additional paint or like a different color?
Additional
Like a new material.
materials. Stucco, siding. I mean, it's,
That was the original request, was to restucco it, and that was denied. So.
and it's making more sense to me now knowing that you bought it in this condition. It feels like it's very much not contributing to the historic character of the neighborhood in its current condition, and especially if somebody goes out and paints that some really ridiculous color. I mean, I know we can't, somebody could do that to a siding house too, I understand. It's just a little stranger with the,
Yeah.
I do feel like a different material, like a stucco or something, would take away less than
Me
what
too.
I'm looking at right
Me
now,
too.
as much as I hate to say it.
But I also wonder if there's a color that is more, not just a bright white, that is kind of more in the tones, or, some sort of, that just doesn't
But we just
stand out as
couldn't
much.
mandate it for the next owner.
Yeah,
or
that's
the
a
next
slippery
next.
slope.
Sure, I'm not saying mandate it, but I'm wondering if he could find something that doesn't seem to stick out. I mean, I would be, there is an architecture feature on the front porch, the arch, and you would stucco over that and lose that.
Well, you could replicate the shape, certainly. I don't know, it is sticking out like a sore thumb in its current condition, and I don't know that I would necessarily ask someone to leave it just like this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and this type of brick, this very textured,
Yeah.
striated, kind of porous brick, it's what I have in my house. When I was in grad school for preservation design, we had an entire class on cleaning bricks and other historic materials, and something like this is nearly impossible to do without damaging the brick. So it's tough. I don't know what the right answer is, but I feel like this could be a unique condition where we not necessarily make a concession, but maybe, I don't know, are a little more creative in a solution.
I agree. I would want the language to be extraordinarily clear that this, if we go that route, that it would be granted because it was not done by the current homeowner. I would not want to at all set a precedent that allowed people to do this and then say,
So I think I have misstated on the portions that are already painted. We have photos going back as far as 2001 showing that painted. So misrepresented initially. We are not, we are considering that previously painted masonry. I think in Angela's discussions with the applicant, that was her assessment, and I'm sorry I got that confused with, because there was a request to stucco that, and there was also a request to paint the rest of the house. So repainting what's already there, he can do right now. It doesn't require review because it's already painted. It's been painted for 20 plus years.
Right.
But if he was to put another finish on that, that would require approval. And then painting the rest of the house would require approval.
Right, no, that's what
Okay,
I was
okay.
picking up.
I think for him, I mean, basically it sounds like you can paint the already existing paint, whatever color you want.
Yeah, I don't want to
Ideally,
do that,
something
though. I don't think the
compatible.
neighbors would be happy with me
Yeah.
doing that, so.
Ideally, something compatible if you do that. You can come back to us with another solution possibly that we would consider because it's kind of, you were kind of forced into this. And I don't think generally the commission would be open to the idea of painting the entire house, but that's something you could propose too, perhaps. I mean, it's up to you, but you're welcome to either paint what you already have or come back to us with a different proposal.
Okay,
on the
could
paint.
I
Is
have
that-
suggestions on what could be palpable to the commission? I don't want to come up here with something that's
Right.
totally off the wall and waste everybody's time, so.
I mean, I think that probably, I personally would be more open to a different material on the portion, well, but then you've got that weird,
I mean, what about
the partial porch surround that's painted.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm struggling with this one badly because the individual structures are not, correct me if I'm wrong, are not registered items on the National Registry. The neighborhood as a whole is what is being preserved. So, to me, this sort of hodgepodge of painting draws more attention to this building than painting it all monochromatically, which would, in my opinion, fit better contextually with the historic fabric of the neighborhood, while it would be in direct conflict with the historic nature of this specific structure. So that's where I'm struggling.
Honestly, that's kind of, I said that and then I'm kind of talked myself back and I'm like, well, or just paint it all. And I mean, it happens. I don't know the answer, but I'm kind of leaning to where you got to.
I agree with that statement wholeheartedly. I'm worried about the precedent of painted brick. I mean, it's a very chic look. It's just not something we normally allow, so I just worry about, it is such a, it does make for, a cute little exterior, and so I don't want it to come before the commission, once every month.
I think that we have a lot of houses with painted brick porch columns, but the rest of the house is not painted. And yes, I would be concerned about going down the path of, well, we want it to match, so just paint the rest of it. I think that perhaps staff could work with the applicant to explore some alternative treatments for the items that are currently painted that blend better, that aren't so visually jarring as
Maybe
the
at least,
bright white.
Finish out the porch structure where it's not painted, because it's just
Right,
the one wall
perhaps.
right now.
Right,
It
yeah.
frankly looks crazy, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But
Yeah.
We sympathize with you.
I'm just asking for direction on how
Yeah.
to go. I'll
I
do whatever
understand.
the commission asks me to do, but I'd rather not paint just the white. I think it's just a bad look, just the
Yeah.
white, a different color, but.
I agree with you.
Katie, what's your suggestion here? This is tough, man.
Is there anybody else in the audience that has thoughts? Sometimes there's,
Well, I would like to hear from the
yeah,
other preservation groups.
yeah.
Come on up. Would you restate your name and address?
Tammy Donnell, 601 Northwest 27th. Yes, I have stripped a indoor fireplace, and I use soy gel. You slather it on and cover it up for several days, and then you are able to wash it off. I used a grinder a wire grinder on my drill, and was able to clean up a fireplace that had been painted. There's also peel away. So
Was it this kind of brick, though?
Huh?
Was it this kind of brick or was it a smooth face?
It
This
was,
is a very
it was a
rough,
rough.
striated.
No, it wasn't smooth brick, but again, it was interior on a indoor fireplace. So, and these products do work well. There's also soda blasting instead of sand blasting. So just, it can be done. It's a mess, but anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this proposal or any other ideas for it?
Zelda
Welcome back.
Gibson, 920 Northwest 25th.
Thank you.
And I have also worked on homes like this as well. And it just takes a lot of elbows grease. It takes time. So patience is what I would have to tell him. And because,
I won't be the one doing it. It's
right, but finding, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just keep finding other people, because to me, like he said, it's kind of an eyesore, even though he bought it that way. So it should have never happened in the first place. And since it is in a historical area, it kind of like, oh my gosh. And so that would be like other people coming forward saying, well, you know, you let this one go, why not that one? So that's my only problem with that.
Can I ask the applicant, what is the material that is above the windows? Is that stucco?
It looks like it's wood, but
Okay,
it
so it's
has a
painted wood.
design
Okay.
printed on it, yeah.
Okay.
My thought would be to allow, and normally I don't like to always say this because it just drags your project out, but I mean, I think allowing you a continuance of that item to allow you to look. I agree that there's always a way to do it, but it's also a thing with one homeowner says, oh, I've done it before in my fireplace in the interior of my house. That's a totally different story than exterior brick that's been around for 100 years. My recommendation, if you're okay with it, is continue that item to allow you the opportunity to look at others, or to allow you to come back to us and say, I've had 5 contractors all say there's no way I can do it. If you have neighbors that say they've done it, ask them to tell you who that was, and that's one way you could do it. That would be my recommendation on that part, just to allow you a little bit more time. Maybe we can work on the other parts.
Okay.
But, I mean, yeah, it's a bad situation. We'd like to help you fix it, and I know Katie can help you do that and work towards that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation on that one item.
Staff would probably recommend a continuance to the August meeting so that he has enough time to both, we can work with the applicant on making sure we have good information that, you know, a wide range of removal methods have been explored, and then also work on alternatives to, okay, if we're not going to get the paint off, what else can we do as far as other materials, other colors, et cetera.
And I looked at this house inside and out too, so you're probably not going to get it done next month anyway. You have structure issues as well to deal with.
Okay, commissioners, anybody a motion or two, perhaps?
And no objections to approving item 6 from the commission?
Not with the attached conditions, I don't.
Yeah, if staff approves the submitted material,
Oh, yeah.
I'm fine with that.
You want to make a motion? Okay. I make a motion for, what are we on here? HPCA 24-032. So to continue item number 1, for more information is necessary. Item number 2, deny items 4 and 5. I'm sorry, continuance for items 4 and 5. And then approval of item 6.
Do we need to make separate motions? Yeah, so just one at a time, a continuance and an approval.
So we have a motion to continue items 1, 4, and 5 to the August meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, a second, thank you. Would you all please vote in prime gov? Okay, so those items are continued to the August 6th meeting, and then we'll move forward with the approval on
Number 6.
number 6. I'm assuming that you are comfortable with the agreed upon conditions that you will submit the citing materials to staff. Okay, thank you.
We need a second, we need a motion.
I made a motion, second. It's Caitlin.
Oh, okay, I didn't.
Is it the same?
Sorry. Yes, second.
Okay.
Okay, would you all please vote in prime gov? Okay, that is approved, so if you will just get with staff regarding the citing, you'll be able to move forward with that aspect of your project, and we'll plan on seeing you again in August. Good luck. Okay, next up, we have HPCA 24-00044 at 225 Northwest 27th Street.
This is in Jefferson Park, Ward 2, consideration and possible action on application by Eprin Lorea for Maria Claraval for certificate of appropriateness to one construct addition to porte-cochere required. This is a request to add on to an existing historic porte-cochere to increase the size. The guidelines generally do not support alterations to historic features of that type, and so staff would generally say that the guidelines are not in support of this proposal. I believe we have recommended a continuance to allow the applicant time to consider any changes to that proposal or to make justification for what has been proposed.
Okay, thank you, Katie. It looks like the applicant is present, so would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Eprin Lorea, and I'm working with the this address 225 Northwest 27th Street.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments, thoughts? Opinions?
Trying to get oriented.
Okay, so it looks like it's just
The
extending
back.
backward.
Yes, we're just extending that carports to the north alongside the building. We're not gonna put any cupboard in all sides, just a post and a roof.
Is it strictly just to provide more covered parking?
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't bother me, really. It's extending towards the back. It's not really changing what you're seeing from the street. I think it fits with what's there. I could get on board with it, personally.
Will it allow you to double stack cars covered? Is that?
That's the plan, like double stack, if we can. Because right now it's only almost just fit one car.
So could staff clarify, because I'm not sure I totally disagree with Commissioner Whitley. Could staff clarify why this sort of expansion would differ from, expanding a garage or an addition or even a porch?
I don't think it does differ from expanding a porch, but we generally don't support expanding a porch on the front of a house. I think historic porte-cocheres have a very typical traditional form and proportion and relationship to the way that they tie into the roof and tie into a historic porch. I think staff would perhaps be more comfortable with something that was separate and detached from the roof of the house and the historic porte-cochere so that you could tell the distinction between the two. I agree with you, you wouldn't really be able to see it beyond the historic porte-cochere if something was lined up directly behind it. I think it's more so the alteration to a historic feature on the front elevation of the house that is a concern to staff.
I do remember a similar proposal for what started out as a similar proposal for one in Mesta Park, in which we kind of did the same round robin about, well, it shouldn't be attached to the original, but I think the end result, while not attached to the original, was stranger than increasing the footprint of the existing portico share. Are the existing dimensions just 11 by 12 currently?
The new carport, it's 10 by 21.
But it's currently only
Right
11 by
now,
12?
it's a 12 by 11 right
Okay.
now.
And so this work's already been started? How far along is this project already?
I'll tell you what happened, the owner, as you can see, there's some form or some 2x that he think he can just add some shed in it. And I think somehow someone from HP had them stop and said, you're doing it wrong. You have to get approval from historical and make a plan. That's what I came in.
And what is the red and white wall?
That was when they bought that. As far as I know, it's just also like a garage door that you can open it, then you can go through the back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that seems weird.
It actually moves?
It moved up and down. Yes.
Okay.
I'd almost prefer the extension of the
Then the
Yeah.
door.
garage door.
I mean, honestly, I
Oh, it
think
comes this direction.
this extension, even though, as you said, it's not something that we've approved before, I think it's a lot less disruptive to the existing structure than a lot of what we've approved before. Like, they're not cutting holes in the roof for new dormers or, two-story additions. It's something that could be taken down in the future with pretty minimal disruption and repair, I think. But
If staff were to, advocate for this basically, like, okay, we're fine with its existence, but we don't want it to be attached to the original existing structure, where would the driveway fall in that scenario? Would it be fine for the driveway to be continuous to the back of a new portico share?
I think the driveway already is continuous all the way to the back. I think you drive through that garage door
Yes.
on into the backyard, and there likely was historically a garage, a detached garage where that existing shed is shown on their site plan.
Okay. Is there any scenario in which staff would be comfortable with an extension that was not quite so large? I mean, they do have a pretty small covered area for parking, and it does, exist as a covered area for parking, but it is pretty tiny.
Yeah, it's actually 16.
The existing is 16?
Yeah, 12's the clear between the columns. What it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got 9 clear between the columns and the house, which is also pretty small.
Yes, as somebody who shuffled my car under my similarly sized portico last night when that storm started.
Yeah.
And climbed out a window, I hear that concern.
But 16's
quite a
not
sight.
deep enough for a complete car either. But it's not 12. 12's like a half cover. I don't know that that matters, just clarifying.
I can't tell for sure from the aerial Google Maps that if it's really paved past the current, does the driveway go past the current existing portico share? That makes sense.
Like past that garage door, does it
Yeah,
continue on?
they had that concrete, they have a sidewalk from the main sidewalk going to the front porch, and then they have a driveway going to that carport right there.
But is there paved concrete beyond the garage door?
They have a little bit concrete there that they have to have some more concrete if they're going to add a new addition.
I mean, to a certain extent, even though it is on the front of the house, it kind of follows the argument about garages. It was likely built with the intention of providing covered parking, but it no longer is sizable enough to provide covered parking. I mean, to me, I would be okay with an extension of it. I do think it's a rather large extension. To me, while it is on the front, it kind of follows the garage argument that it needs to be reasonably large enough to house a common modern vehicle.
I think we've had more comfort with garages evolving because they are typically in the back, they're typically minimally visible from the street, whereas a porte cochere is an attached component of the front elevation of the house. I hear what you're saying. I think that's where staff feels like if they could construct something that is freestanding and not a continuation of the historic roof form, historic porte cochere form, it could maybe meet those needs, but be a little better differentiated from the house and be a little more reversible if someone were to come back and build a two-car garage in the future and say, well, we don't really need this, extra cover on the side.
And I don't know if this sways it one way or the other, but if you look at your west elevation, you're kind of taking that broken roof across and clipping that gable on the side. Now, that's not really visible from the street because that house next to it's so close to it. But I'm just thinking from a constructability standpoint, I think you're getting into some tricky waterproofing, re-roofing, flashing details right there in that corner. Does that make sense, Commissioners, what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
The right side of that gable?
Yeah, you're structurally tying in
Yeah.
to the gable.
So, I mean, maybe a detached floating structure with the double column, maybe a little, like, I don't know, 2-foot space between it or something, may look nice and not require you to really get into that existing envelope and structure. It might be easier to build. The only issue there is dealing with your water as it comes off that roof between the porte cochere and the house.
Yeah, my only question with that is if you're not tying into the structure of the house, that means you're building a new freestanding column off of the house, and that's only 10 feet back there beyond the new column they're proposing. So that means you're going to get even less than 9 feet if they still do a similar size column, which...
Because right now they only have 8 actually back there because the house jogs
Yeah.
at that. Yeah.
And I would think that far back, those columns are not going to be visible, so perhaps a more modest column would let them squeeze a little more room into that space.
Neighborhood comments on this one?
I
I don't believe we,
I mean, again,
Are there any members of the public here who'd like to add to the conversation? No?
and I can't, I have a hard time turning the design
Yeah.
node off, but it's almost like, would you slide it farther back to where it sort of straddles that? And then you can get the columns both in those recessed areas? I don't know. Maybe it continues to have that thought about, but yeah, I think there's some, even if you got approval, I think there's some messiness to it that would need to get resolved anyway.
I think we'd want to see some details on how it's tied in, but...
they do have one continuance remaining. Staff is happy to take this feedback and sit down with the applicant, sit down with the homeowner, and see if we have some other ideas.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Are you okay with a continuance to another meeting to discuss what's been discussed here and see if we can come up with some alternative designs?
Sure.
Okay. So I would say August 7th because it's going to be a quick turnaround between now and that July meeting to get that done.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to continue HPCA 24-00044 to the August 7th meeting with the specific findings noted in the staff report.
A second.
Okay, commissioners, please vote in PrimeGov,
What happened?
or maybe out loud.
I always think it's me.
Jordan, your vote.
Yay.
Gaines,
Yes.
Poor,
Yes.
Ramey,
Yay.
Whitley.
Yes.
Okay. I believe the motion carries. Okay. Do we need to, let's see.
Yeah, to officially do anything, we're just, we can just pause for a moment because we don't have a quorum.
Okay. Okay, well, regarding that last one, we will see you the next time.
Katie, can you give your overview that you were going to give right now?
I think it's probably a little more thorough than,
Well, and that is the commission member who specifically requested it,
Ah,
so
okay.
she probably wouldn't appreciate it if I went ahead and launched in.
I think she was just stepping out for just a very quick second, so I think we could quickly afterwards move on to the Board of Adjustment cases.
Good timing.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break? People can
I
step
mean,
out for a moment?
I'd probably prefer to keep going. I know that, no, I mean, when she comes back,
Wait
I think
for
that, I think Katie's asking if we want to make an official longer break, correct?
Yeah, just, okay, yeah. Sometimes we take a break once we get to 4 o'clock, so if we're already paused, take a 5-minute break.
I have a pretty hard stop, and I've already heard a lot of discussion on the ADU and been
Okay.
to a lot of the meetings, so I just want to make sure we have quorum for the Board of Adjustment
Okay.
cases.
When
Feel
is your
very
hard-
well versed in the ADU conversation, unfortunately. When is your hard stop? I mean, 4:15. If we're still somehow discussing these things that need voted on, I will of course stay, but I think we can get through the Board of Adjustment things in the next few minutes.
Is there still no news on another commission member with how much we've been hitting almost not quorum?
I met with the mayor's office yesterday about commission committee appointments and noted that that was a welcome action. So hopefully we've got some movement there soon.
Okay. Shall we move on to other business? We've got some Board of Adjustment cases to consider.
So BOA 15645 at 529 Northwest 22nd, Nestor Park, Ward 6. This is a renewal of a previously issued special exception for home sharing. All 3 of these are renewals. Consideration and possible action on application by Adela de Leon Veliz to request a recommendation to Board of Adjustment regarding application for special exception to allow for home sharing. This one is in HP, so those requirements about it being their primary residence and then being on site at the time of rental do apply. The applicant has affirmed that they will follow all of those requirements and that it is their primary residence. So staff has recommended a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment.
I have a quick question. How often do they have to come and renew these?
Board of Adjustment issues, they define the time for the special exceptions. When these first started, they often would only do 1 year, 1 or 2 years. They can do, I think, up to 10 years.
Okay.
So as these start coming back and they have no issues and nobody's complained, I think they'll start getting a longer window.
Yeah. And I think certainly in this neighborhood, without letters of complaint, we could safely move this forward with a renewal.
So we just need a motion to recommend approval.
I'll make a motion for BOA 15645 for recommendation of approval. Yeah.
Second.
Okay, would you all please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, that has passed. So moving on to BOA 15659.
This is at 704 Northwest 27th Street, Paseo, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on an application by John Vu to request a recommendation to Board of Adjustment regarding application for special exception for home sharing. This is one that is in an HL overlay district, so they only need a special exception when it is not their primary residence. The applicant has indicated that all applicable criteria and requirements will be met, and staff has recommended approval.
Commissioners, any questions?
Anybody from here, from the public? No.
Anybody here wish to speak on this?
I move recommend approval of BOA 15659.
Second.
Okay, would you all please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, that motion carries as well. So moving on to BOA 15666.
This is at 418 Northwest 24th Street, Jefferson Park, Ward 2. Consideration and possible action on application by SunTran ST Rentals LLC to request a recommendation to Board of Adjustment regarding an application for a special exception to allow home sharing. We did have, just to, I guess, make this point, we had a communication with this applicant indicating that that this actually is his primary residence and he doesn't think he needs a special exception. We said we would go ahead and make a recommendation just in case if there's something he needs to submit that doesn't check that box and he still ends up having to go to Board of Adjustment, this will have been taken care of. If it turns out he doesn't need to go to BOA, then he just has an extra endorsement from the HP Commission for his home share. So
Okay.
again, no issues with this one. We've recommended approval.
Anybody wish to speak to this one? Anybody wish to make a motion or a recommendation?
I move to recommend approval of BOA 15666.
Second.
Okay, would you all please vote in PrimeGov? Okay, that motion carries as well. Okay, communications and reports. Looks like, sorry, I've lost my little sheet. Give me just a second. Looking for my other sheet, this one. Here we go. So administrative approvals.
Nothing in particular to report. As always, feel free to reach out to staff if you ever see anything on here that you have questions about. Happy to provide that information. Same for withdrawals and administrative closing, just items that got submitted but ultimately are not going to be moving forward.
Okay. Administrative closings?
Yeah, same, just, yep.
Sorry, I think I was reading during a bit of that.
Yep.
And anything from Board of Adjustment?
I think the only thing from Board of Adjustment was the case that you all already heard that was
Okay.
remanded back to us.
Okay. Planning Commission?
So Planning Commission, I was going to briefly talk about the accessory dwelling ordinance. As you all have gotten emails from me, you've probably heard from other folks. There is a proposed ordinance to allow accessory dwellings in R1, R2, R3, R4, and NC base zoning districts. This would, if approved as proposed, would allow accessory dwellings in our HL overlay neighborhoods that have those base zones. It does not affect HP because HP is its own base zone, and that accessory dwelling use is not being added at this time to HP. Each base zone has a use table that lists the uses that are allowed. To add accessory dwellings, we would be going in and amending the use table. If we were to do that in HP, that would come before all of you for a recommendation. So, but because the HL is an overlay and they're just adding it to the base zones, it didn't come to this body for a recommendation. We have heard some support, but also some concerns from historic districts. We've had 2 in-person meetings, one with Heritage Hills East Neighborhood Association Board, one with Jefferson Parks Neighborhood Association Board, and other folks from different neighborhoods were invited in as well and allowed to attend. And then we had a Zoom meeting last night to hear from neighbors with those concerns. The ordinance will go forward to Planning Commission for their recommendation to council on June 13th. And depending on the outcome of that, would, at a date to be determined, proceed to City Council for 3 separate hearings before it took effect. So lots more information that I can provide. We actually have the presentation from last night loaded into the computer here. But what questions do you all have? What do you want me to address?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just want to know, have you actually counted how many properties in these HL neighborhoods would possibly qualify that don't already have an accessory dwelling unit? From my count for Heritage Hills East, it would be 13 possible properties.
That seems about right, if not a little high for Heritage Hills East. It's only the HL part, so it's only the
Right.
south half.
Right.
Portions of Heritage Hills East are C4.
Right.
Which is the most intense commercial zoning district we have, and the ADUs are not being added to C4. So those properties, such as along 14th Street, would not be eligible.
Yeah.
It would only be properties that are 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that only have a single-family home. You cannot add an accessory dwelling where there is a duplex, a fourplex, et cetera. So yes, Heritage Hills East, it's a very small number. Jefferson Park and Paseo, the NC base zone, which is what Paseo is already allows two-family residential. So any of those properties that are a single-family home would be allowed to add an accessory dwelling. Jefferson Park is R2 and R4 for the base zone primarily, a little bit of commercial, but mostly R2 and R4. So again, any of those where it's a single-family home and there's not already a garage apartment could add an accessory dwelling.
Yeah, I just think it's very minimal how many properties it affects, and there's a very large outroar from several groups that show up often here, so it's interesting.
That, like Zoom call that you had last night, so would that be something that you can send us notification of if we wanted to attend those?
Yes.
Did you?
I did, but happy to send you the PowerPoint. I know we've got some folks that have to leave fairly soon, but happy to schedule another time and give the full-fledged presentation at this meeting. But you'll get a lot from just looking through the PowerPoint at what would be allowed. I think the biggest takeaways for historic is that every aspect of the design review process would remain intact. You would need approval to demolish a structure. You would need approval to renovate the exterior of a building. You would need approval to build a new building, and it would be subject to our existing standards and guidelines.
So just to help me place that correctly. So the obvious accessory dwelling to me would be like a garage apartment. So would the guidelines, restrictions on two-story garages be in conflict, or would they constrain?
They would constrain.
So you wouldn't be able to do an accessory dwelling on properties that were not allowed a two-story.
Right. If you all think a two-story accessory building is not appropriate in that location, then you would not be able to have a two-story accessory building.
Okay. So this
HP would
ordinance doesn't
supersede.
override. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so they would still have to meet all of the HP or HL guidelines, or, they'd still come back before us.
I can't think of a scenario where you could actually do that.
But
I think the only difference is like if you could do a garage apartment, you could just put a full kitchen in it now instead of
Yes.
a wet bar. Okay.
Yeah.
Could you
That's the difference.
convert an existing garage to a dwelling
Yes.
unit?
So you could have a standalone accessory dwelling that is not a garage. If you had a one-story, two-car garage and you wanted to convert the whole thing to a dwelling, or you wanted to make it a one-car and have one bay be a dwelling. We've seen people do that with, to make like a pool house kind of thing. But instead of it being a pool house, it could actually be a true ADU.
Okay. Understood.
Well, as this goes forward, I will keep you all updated on the status of it. And, at the appropriate time, as necessary, we'll bring it back to you for any sort of more formal discussion that's required.
One quick question. So letters, if somebody were to provide a letter of support or opposition, a letter to the Planning Commission, when would you recommend those be submitted by?
I would say as soon as possible. So that meeting is next week, and their packet will be going out on Friday, so ideally by Friday. Of course, if something comes in later, they're going to do their very best to get it to Planning Commission, just like we do. But emails can be sent to subdivisionandzoning@okc.gov. And if you send something to me, I'm going to get it to the right person.
Okay. Okay, oops, I'm sorry, I turned off my microphone. Rita, anything from the municipal counselor's office? Okay. Our next meeting date is July 3rd, 2 p.m. here at, yeah, we are July 3rd, correct? Okay, is that on the table to be rescheduled, or are we, okay, so July 3rd, 2 p.m. Items from commissioners. Anything you guys want to share or continue to discuss? Any citizens to be heard? Any citizens in here? Okay, let's adjourn.